Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We're excited to talk about this topic today, best practices for managing IBMI storage. I'm Greg Schmidt, and I'm joined by my colleague Bob Butcher, an IBMI expert here at Fortra. Today's session isn't just about using Fortra's robot space to address storage issues, but the bigger focus is helping you understand where storage is being consumed, what typically drives growth, and how to spot problems early before they turn into outages or fire drills. This is the first session in a new series of webinars and podcasts focused around IBMI operation best practices, built around the reality many teams are facing: rapid data growth and limited skills and bandwidth. Today is meant to be an overview and a strong foundation with practical takeaways that Bob is going to share from his real-world experiences. In this session, in the sessions that follow, we're going to go deeper into the how-tos, including configurations, thresholds, step-by-step, processes you can apply in your own environment using robot space. All right, now let's set the stage a little here today with a scenario that probably feels pretty familiar and painful to a lot of you out there, and especially Bob. You lived this throughout your career, I'm pretty sure. Your disk space usage jumped 20% last month, right? And another 5% in the last hour. Suddenly you're scrambling, running a variety of commands, IBMI commands, maybe even stitching together some SQL queries, trying to chase down what's eating space across your system. And the real problem isn't just the growth, it's the time it takes to prove where something's coming from. If that sounds like you, you're not alone. Data growth is exploding across every industry. And even when budgets go up, capacity disappears fast when you don't have sustainable storage strategies. The risk isn't just we need more disk, it's the fire drills, the after hours work, and the operational uncertainty that comes with it. And Bob, just to ask you a little question here from that standpoint, is this something that you've seen and actually felt in the industry with your career?
Yeah. Hey, Greg. Yeah, the commands that you had on there are all the commands that I would manually run, and you're absolutely right. Getting those phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, "Hey, I've hit critical storage. Can you help me out?" These are the types of commands I dreaded running because you're manually doing that, and that's one of the things that I like about robot space that we'll address today.
Perfect. And with that, what I'm going to do is go into just maybe a little bio of each of us here. So starting out, I'll just start out if that's okay. My name is Greg Schmidt. I'm a senior solution engineer here at Fortra. 27 years of experience now. My areas of expertise are IBM automation solutions, document and forms automation, accounts payable and receivable automation, and also business intelligence solutions. I also have over 25 years of experience in the IBMI report and spool file distribution world. My passions over the years have really been, with helping companies secure and automate their information, and in turn helping them with streamlining their automation efforts on the IBMI and other platforms across their organization. All right, Bob, a little background on you.
Yeah, so my name's Bob Butcher. I am a solutions engineer here at Fortra. I was a former customer that used the Robot HA and the PowerTech products. In my previous life, I was a systems administrator, and what we're talking about today, robot space, is something as a systems admin when you get those calls in the middle of the night, or you got to figure out where's my disk space going. I wish I had this robot space product in my back pocket. And today, I'm hoping I can share some of the secrets of the things that I've discovered over the years, the past 30 years I've been on the platform, to help out the people on the call today.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob. One final housekeeping thing before we get started with today's webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording after the webinar, usually within about 24 hours, so you can rewatch or share with others in your organization or even with someone in the IBMI community. As we go through, please drop your questions into the chat, especially if you got one of these mystery growth stories that you're seeing recurring spikes on your system. And if we have time at the end of the webinar, we're going to answer some of those questions. But if not, we will respond to them after the webinar is over to you directly. As the IBMI continues to be mission critical platform for many organizations today, at Fortra we deliver a suite of integrated solutions that are purpose-built for IBMI to help you secure, automate, and optimize your operations so you can focus on driving your business forward. We have solutions like message management, application and performance monitoring and alerting, business intelligence, document and workflow automation capabilities, document creation and delivery solutions, scheduling automation, capacity planning, backup and high availability, and a full suite of cybersecurity solutions. Whether your challenge is compliance, automation, reporting, or uptime, we are here to simplify and strengthen your operations. Today's topic with storage monitoring and automation fits into the robot space solution topic. Robot space helps with forecasting and resource awareness on your IBMI. Robot space gives organizations awareness of storage growth and system trends before they become outages or budget surprises. It answers questions like, are we going to run out of storage? What volumes are growing the fastest? Where are cleanup opportunities that we can take advantage of? And with its automation capabilities, it can do the work for you. Before we get into the main topic, I would like just to bring up some data from this year's IBMI Marketplace survey that we put on. And these results fit right in with the topic that we're doing today. Looking at the results of the top 10 concerns from the survey, this chart tells a clear story. Skills, security, and modernization are dominating the IT planning process. IBMI skills are sitting at, number one at 69%. And this shortage affects everything else. Now, storage might not be the top bar here. It's sitting at 21%, but storage is a multiplier. When growth isn't controlled, it turns into capacity planning issues, cost pressures, and even HA and DR risks. So today we're going to focus on storage best practices that make IBMI operations more predictable, even when expert time is limited. And we are going to touch on how robot space helps you standardize and automate that work. Let's unpack this data a little bit more and what it means operationally. When 56% can't find developers and 44% can't find admins, you end up with thin coverage. One or two people who know everything, and everyone else is trying not to break anything. Now add 38% saying training isn't accessible and 34% saying leadership doesn't prioritize the skills problem. And this is where tribal knowledge becomes a real risk. And notice 24% staffs of people saying staff or new hires are reluctant to work on the IBMI. That's not always a platform issue. That's often an experience issue. Unclear processes, unclear runbooks, and the fear of making changes. This is why storage is such a practical place to start. The real world, storage doesn't announce itself if there's a problem, right? It creeps up on you. And when you don't have the deep bench strength, you need guardrails. You need ways to have thresholds and trend visibility and a consistent response playbook and alerts. Now, if you'd like to see more of the results from the IBMI Marketplace survey, please check us out at unleashthepower.fortra.com, and then look under our resources tab for the IBMI Marketplace survey results. Also, keep an eye out for our new podcast that's coming out. It's called Unleash the Power, IBMI and Beyond. And the first episode will be focusing on this one, talking about the marketplace survey and sort of the data underneath it, and just focusing on a couple of the slides from it. All right, now let's move on to the fun stuff here and move on to the best practices of data growth. In this section, Bob was going to cover reasons to remove the clutter. He's going to talk about top areas where data can be used up at, and then also deep dive into areas where you can start to look at reclaiming some of your disk space. All right, Bob, enough for me. I am going to hand it over to you to talk about the main topic.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. So 3 reasons to remove the clutter on your system. I came up with these 3. These are the 3 that I've used kind of as a guide, as a system admin. One is performance. I went to a class years ago, and I was always told, you should run your system 70 at the disk percentage 70% or lower. And I get it, drives are faster than they were before, but I just, my opinion is high usage still affects performance. Okay, the higher that disk percentage is, the performance might be degraded a little bit. HR solution. I was a customer of Robot HA, and I totally get this. The more clutter you have on your production box, your source box, you're replicating all of that stuff over to your target box. Why not keep the product, the production box cleaned up and leave the clutter behind so your target box doesn't have all of that extra stuff. And then backups. I used to get a phone call in the middle. We used to run a daily backup from 4 to 5 in the morning. I'd get a call at 5:15 from supervisors management saying, "Hey, why isn't the system up?" And that was my indicator that probably something has been added to the system that wasn't there yesterday or last week. When you start thinking about backups, you start thinking about, it affected our users, it affected uptime, people getting on the system. It also affected the number of tapes possibly that you're using for your backups. You have to spend more money on that. So those were 3 of the reasons why I always wanted to remove clutter on my system. So Greg, go to the next slide. Thank you. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. I'll give you some examples. These are some of the things in my past that I've used and I've looked at to regain space. So if we start under the files, save files, probably everybody's done something with third-party software, right? You FTP a save file up to your system and you're doing an install or an upgrade. That's a place where I see a lot of the save files. Another place where you might see save files, your development team. Maybe your developers are going to save files because they're going to write an application. And they have to go back and maybe restore some of that data. Or the common one that I see is we're going to do a save file. We're going to save something on our prod system. Now we're going to send that over to our test box. And guess what? Those save files get left out there. So that's a real good place to look. Save files that sit on your system that haven't been used in a while. Files with deleted records. There's a flag in there, reuse deleted records. A lot of the physical files I see out there today don't reuse the deleted records. So what happens is when your applications delete records, it'll keep that space there. That even though there's a deleted record there, the space of where the record was will still be used. So one of the things that I was always checking is, especially with my production files, running a reorganized physical file member to kind of compress those files, shrink those files. Now this was one, same files, multiple libraries. I don't know how many times I would run a work object command, and I would type in a file name of one of my production files, and you put in library star all, and lo and behold, it kicks back, hey, I've got 10 copies of this file that's got 5 million records in it. And now all of a sudden you're taking up a lot of space. So one thing that I would say here is if you are using files to test for production, You might want to maybe delete some of the records in there so you don't have all of that extra space being used. History files, QHIS, if you were to type in a command work file, WRKF, QHIS star, you could see all of the history files that are out there. I've been on systems where I've seen years worth because they weren't cleaning these things up. So that's a place you might want to look. Now, vendor application log files. I was out there the other day and I was looking, running Robot Space, and I'm out there looking. I've got a file out there that's 80 gig, and I'm like, wow, what's going on? Know nothing about the application. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe there's a purge process. The concept here is, one thing you could do is you could contact all of your vendors and say, hey, is there a purging? Is there a purge process in part of the application where I can clear my history files, gracefully, where I'm not, disrupting the application. Logical files. Okay, you got a customer file that's sorted by my customer number. Now I got a developer's like, I want to look at that data, but I want to look at it from a zip code or some other critical field in that. I've gone out and I've seen a lot of logical files that if you go out and you look at the last time used, it was years. Somebody might throw a logical file out there and then never use it. So that's another place too, whether you're using Robot Space or you're using your retrieved disk info and you're looking at objects, a good place would be, when's the last time that it was used. Now, if we jump over to the libraries, duplicate libraries, a couple things that I want to make a note here, and this is just one of my pet peeves. When you're creating objects on the system, okay, or you're creating a library, they have a text description for a reason. My suggestion would be always put a description on your objects. I've seen people that have retired, that left companies, or you've got to troubleshoot something and they're not around, and you have no clue what you're dealing with. So when you're creating libraries, for testing, maybe you've got a naming convention. Put in a text description. Now, does it follow compliance? The reason why I put this in there is because more and more companies are going to, I'm auditing, I'm going through compliance, I'm doing some of those things. And I've seen some of these files that are sensitive to organizations, like say a payroll file or, something that's got PII data in it, personal information data in it. And what they do is they copy this data into a test library without even thinking about it. And if you're going to test large files, if you're going to copy large files into test libraries, do you need all of the records in there to kind of save some space? Now, the next thing, software installation libraries, clean up old version. I was guilty of this. I would go out and I would, there's two vendors I can think of where I never cleaned up the old versions. I left it out there, because I'm doing an upgrade or, an installation, and you would leave the old versions out there. There's really no reason to do that. It's just clutter on your system. So keep that in mind. Libraries never used on the backup, are they needed? One of the things, if you're familiar with the retrieve disk info command, one of the things that I would do is I would go out and I would run that, and then you would run a print disk info command, and I would go out and I would look at the last used date. You'd be amazed. I got libraries out there that haven't been used in years, but you're them up. They're still somewhere on a backup. And that's probably time to ask yourself, are they really needed? Take a peek at that last used timestamp, because that'll kind of help you. Now, if we jump over to the IFS, image catalogs, I was the biggest offender of this. When I was doing an OS upgrade, or I was getting ready to put on the latest and greatest tech refresh or cum tape or a group PTF or hyper PTFs, I would throw all those bin files into an image catalog, and I would forget. And when you're doing patching, typically 25, 30 gig, when you're doing that stuff, an OS upgrade might be 20 gig. That stuff adds up after a while. Now, I wanted to kind of put virtual tape on here. I actually had a customer that was using BRMS, and they use virtual tape, which means they were actually, the way we had it configured is they were backing up volumes into an image catalog, which was eating space in the IFS. So I have seen that as well, just something to keep an eye on. Now, this is probably my favorite or least favorite, however you want to look at it. This temp directory. Temp directory, I think, is kind of a playground for third-party applications or application development. And it's something that I never really checked until one day I stumbled across it. And I realized it's the biggest directory on my system. In here, you can find old log files, old zip files, files maybe for IBM when you're doing some testing, things like that. This would be something that I would frequently check because there's a lot of files that were out here that haven't been touched in a long time. So that's where that last use timestamp might help you figure out if you need that stuff that's in that temp directory. And then duplicating directories for testing. Again, it's the same thing as the duplicate libraries. Are you duplicating sensitive data? And if you are, do you need all of that sensitive data? And understanding what it is so you're not maybe stepping on something with compliance or auditing with those files there. And then, Greg, maybe you can touch upon on the last two things under IFS.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, those sort of fall underneath something I deal with every day on the document and forms management side. PDF conversion directories. If you're creating, I'll say customer presentable documents using older AFP processes, or if you have spool file conversion programs, even in this case, that are creating spool files and creating PDFs out of them into directories for distribution. Or in a lot of cases, we run into when we have conversations with customers, they might be using our iForms document creation deliveries product that can take spool files or databases and create those documents, right? They could be invoices, they could be shipping documents and things like that that are being created. But you need to have a cleanup process for that, right? Put them in a directory, unless you're normally not storing them there, for long-term purposes, because the data in most cases is you can recreate the documents from the data that you have in your systems. So you sort of want to look at those directories, and they're sort of used as temp directories in most cases, right? So like Bob was talking about the temp directory, a lot of people will use those as temp directories, but they never go back and clean them up from that standpoint. And then with the image file side of things, I'm very familiar with that because if people are using like our WebDocs system, right, our WebDocs document management system, in some cases those documents could be stored on the IFS. So I always look at a couple different things and say, do they need to be stored on the IFS? From that standpoint, do you want to use that as your storage medium for the documents? The application might be running native on the I, but we don't need the documents technically native in the IFS in that scenario, right? They could be on a SAN or a NAS server, or you could even do an NFS share mount to a Windows server or a Linux share at that point. So you do have that capability inside of there, but you just want to look at cleanup too, right? Do you look at your retention policies if you're using a document management system with whatever one you're using? Do you need all those documents out there? And some of those documents, yes, you probably need them for a lifetime, but some of them you might only need 2 to 3 years, 7 years, and stuff like that. And remember, from a compliance standpoint, holding on to too much data from a compliance standpoint is a risk as well. It's not always deleting stuff. It's also if you're holding on to it too long, it could put you at risk. All right, Bob.
Awesome. Great point. Just 3 other things that I've seen in my travels as a system admin and disk eating up some disks. Journal receivers. Now, most of you probably use the QWAD journ. Where that's going to be used, maybe for replication or for auditing purposes. But one of the 3 things I'd always check if somebody had some issues, I would always start with retrieve disk info. Then I would look at aging output queues, and then journal receivers. I would always take a look at how many journal receivers do I have in the QWAD journ. I've seen customers that have years worth of stuff that they never had anything in place to clean those up. So something to keep track of. Output queues, aging spool files. I got a call 2 o'clock in the morning one time, Bob, we've hit critical storage. Can you help? First thing I do is I look at out queues. What's the size of out queues? And I've got a customer that has 750,000 spool files. They had an application that went crazy. So I'd be checking how can I age my out queues regularly. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about, performance data. I've seen some objects out there, when you go into performance, whether you're using a third-party tool or the IBM tools, the collections are probably turned down to be cleaned up, but every once in a while you'll see some objects that are star MGT COL objects that haven't been cleaned up. So things to consider there. Greg, you want to go to the next slide?
Yep, there you go.
So some bonus things, and I kind of wanted to we went through a lot on the previous slide, but these are some things just to kind of keep in mind. So we talked about deleting save files, but if you go out into library QGPL or QUsersys, you might see some save files called QMF and then a 5-digit number, or QSF 5-digit number. These are most likely IBM save files. And what if you've gone out and you've run the send PTF order command, or you've downloaded PTFs previously, you might have some of this old clutter, these save files, which are actually used for PTS. If you have actually applied, permanently or temporarily applied your PTFs, my suggestion is, instead of a delete file command, use the delete PTF command, because what that'll do is not only will it remove the save files, but also all of the cover letters that come with those save files. Now, if you go out there and you've done a retrieve disk info, or you use a tool like Robot Space, and you go out there and you see a large library called QUserBRM, and you're like, okay, wow, this is pretty big. One of the things that affects that is when you create your backups and you go into your control groups, there is a parameter called detail. And if you have that set at *yes, that will make the files in that QUser or USRBRM library get rather large, because now you're storing all of that detail of all the objects that you're saved. So my suggestion here is just verify and make sure that you're running that start MNT BRM command frequently, because this cleans up a lot of the BRMS functions in the background. And there's a parameter in there called reorg BRMS DB. But if you set that to *yes, what that'll do is that'll reorganize or shrink those big BRMS database files. So that way you can take advantage of having some automatic cleanup in BRMS. Now, we talked in the previous slide about cleaning up QHIST files, the history files. We talked about maybe aging some out queues. When I think of big out queues, I always think of QEZ job log or QEZ debug. There is a menu out there called Go Cleanup, which is designed to just clean up IBM objects like history files, message queues, out queues. This will automatically clean up some of those objects, those IBM objects, like the history files, out queues. My suggestion would be check and see if you're using that. I believe that there's a job that will be spun up in the QCTL subsystem, and you can kind of go out there and see if that's running. Step 4, if you use the QAudJourn security audit journal. Now, we had talked about that in the previous slide, things to check. But one of the things, or one of the questions I used to get a lot, is this security audit journal is critical. If you're doing audits, if you're doing replications, a lot of times QAudJournal has to be out there. But one of the things that I discovered in my travels, in my security, looking at IBM security and things like that, is there is a system value called QAud level, and there's a setting called *job data. And a lot of times people would say, why do I have so many security audit journal receivers? And this job data, what it will do is it'll capture all the starting and the stopping of the jobs on your partition. If you've got a super busy system where a lot of this is going on, you could fill up those journal receivers fast. And my suggestion would be just double check and see if you need that. If you do, you get it. Just make sure that you're cleaning up your journal receivers. Now, the last tip that I'll leave you with is this. It's a security tip. It's not so much to reduce clutter, but maybe get you in the habit of looking at this. Now, Greg showed the marketplace survey, and the number two thing on there was cybersecurity. Just a security tip. I would do this routine. I would probably do it, maybe quarterly, every 6 months. I would check and see, what profiles on your user profiles on your system are actually being used. There's a couple different ways you can do it. But if you've got profiles on your system that have special authorities, that have all object authority, maybe star save sys, star IO sysconfig, and they're not being used, if you can't remove them or have somebody look at them, at the minimum, disable them, because now you're shutting down a way for somebody to potentially, that has special authority to get on the system, do some damage. The other thing is, I would consider reviewing all of your file shares frequently. For the folks that aren't familiar with file shares, like, I'm going to map a drive from my PC to a directory in the IFS. And my suggestion would be, a little bit homework for you if you're not familiar with this, is take a look and see, are your file shares being used? And if they're not, can you remove them to help prevent malware, ransomware down the road? So Greg, I went through a lot of stuff. That's all I got for this slide here.
Yeah, that was perfect, Bob, from that standpoint. But yeah, thanks. Yeah, a lot of great data. So like I said, if people need to rewatch and stuff too, or even give us a call, kind of a feel too. But just really quickly, from the standpoint of a solution overview. So again, we're not going to do a live demo today, but I just want to do a quick overview of the solution that we have, Robot Space, that we sort of talked a little bit about as we were going through here today, that can help you with some of these areas, right? So Robot Space has many features. Robot Space is truly focused around three key areas, like real-time monitoring, collections and alerting, and also audits that can help you apply automation to things. So in the next conversations that we're going to have in the next webinars, we're going to be talking about storage collections and how how we can use storage collections to look at the entire system or look at isolated libraries, files, or objects, or we can do comparisons on growth and look at different thresholds inside the system within collections. And you can even be alerted on collections when collections are done if it hits those thresholds. So we're going to look at those different areas. And we're also going to focus on, in another session, we're going to focus on storage audits, and how we can use some of the pre-configured storage audits that come with Robot Space, right? That help you look at duplicate libraries, objects, directories, look at that growth, the aged IFS, growth and stuff like that, spool files in output queues and stuff like that. So, and even help with some of the things that Bob was talking about, like reorging files and stuff like that. And then, of course, obviously, there's reporting, right? So there's trend reports and different kinds of usage reports and graphs that you can see inside the system too, that we're going to focus on inside of there, along with a really cool tool that's built into it. It's a CSI, it's called, inside of there, but it's a critical storage investigator wizard that helps you and guides you through to pinpoint some of those growth issues with inside the solution. Now, again, we are going to have some upcoming webinars and even some podcasts. That's why I said, look out for some of the podcasts in Unleash the Power podcast, IBM and beyond. We're going to focus more on some of these topics and try to keep them bite-sized for you, so you can so they're a little bit easier to consume in everyone's busy days. But stay tuned. There'll be more to come on this topic. And the last thought before we sign off here today. What would you change in your week if storage stopped being a surprise, right? That's the goal. Turn storage from a reactive firefighting incident into a predictable routine. Thanks everyone for joining today. And again, thank you, Bob, for all the expert guidance and knowledge on this topic that you provided to us today. And like I said in the beginning, this is just the first session in our upcoming webinars and podcast series. So look for invites for deeper how-tos and into these topics. And again, we'll send the recording link out usually within about 24 hours, so you can rewatch or share with anyone in your organization or in the industry. And everyone have a great day, and thanks for your time.